Hey there, fellow streakers. We're back
Welcome
with
back.
you again, and we're with Craig still. I mean, this is just, Craig, we're so privileged to have you on another one of our podcasts
Thanks for
and
doing this.
Happy to
continuing
be
forward.
here.
Yeah, it's really great.
We are having such a good time. So I kind of wanted to pick up a little bit where we left off. Because as we were talking, my mind was just kind of exploding. And the thing that a couple things, let's see if I can get my thoughts out here. The first one was I loved when we were talking about that we stop progressing, we stop pushing ourselves to get better, that we get more comfortable with mediocrity every year.
Yeah.
And because it's something I've thought a lot about in myself is I want to be comfortable. I tell myself, I just want to get comfortable. But when I get comfortable, I feel this thing inside of me thinking, you're just being lazy. You gotta push yourself. But then when I get out there and I push myself, it's uncomfortable. And as you were talking, I thought, isn't it interesting that we in society, especially in the United States, I feel like there's this idea that you work really hard so that you can retire, so that you can be done working.
Yes.
But yet how many people when they reach that place where they've worked hard and now they're done and they can just coast and be comfortable, aren't happy with it. Like it doesn't make you feel good inside. And so I loved what you said, this idea that what's natural is that we want to be
Yes.
better,
Yes.
but it can be uncomfortable. And so we fight this thing inside of us that's saying, well, actually, I want to be comfortable. But I've noticed in myself that when I genuinely, truly get comfortable, I can only be there for a little while before I start to get kind of antsy and think, what am I doing with my life? What's my
Yes.
purpose? Am I even trying? And you start to get unhappy.
Yeah.
And so,
I think it's such a helpful way to look at it. And it's one of the reasons I've stopped thinking about achievement because
mhm,
we're such an achievement oriented, especially in the US, such an achievement oriented culture. And all social media does is amp that up. Um, for another podcast, we'll talk about the toxic byproducts of social media. And at the risk of being a social media hater and you getting the wrong kind of email, Jamie and Jeffrey, it's just that it just amps up that idea of achievement. I'm convinced it's not about achievement.
mm-mm,
It's about contribution.
right.
That's what naturally drives us. So what happens is instead of naturally going with contribution, how am I giving back? How am I contributing to others? How am I giving to society? We are a community of people. I had a discussion on this whole topic of achievement and what you're doing with your life. I was talking with an executive and he's working 90-hour weeks. He's in the grind. Now he makes great money,
Right.
fabulous money. So if you're looking at like bank accounts in terms of outcomes, he's killing it. And it's killing him, literally,
Hmm.
his
Yeah.
physical health, his relationships. And I asked him the question. I said, he just turned, I think he's like late 50s. I asked him, I said, do you see yourself working when you're 80? And he looked at me and he kind of, like my mother did without the turkey. Are you kidding
Right.
me? Look, by then I'm in Florida. I'm sitting on the beach and again, focused on the outcome.
Right.
And I said, really? He goes, yeah, why would I keep doing this? I said, well, a better question is, why are you doing this? Because if you can't see yourself continuing to do what you're doing, you might be doing the wrong things. And so in my case, and Jeff, I think you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
My goal is to work through my 90s. I think I've got about another 30 years left. And if you're doing what you love in a way that's sustainable, that's making incremental contributions on a daily basis in a way that lights you up and fills you with love and drive, why would you stop at 80 or 90? You
Right.
would keep going.
Yeah.
The challenge is most of us are doing the wrong work.
So how did you make that switch from what you were, and maybe you weren't, maybe you have always been programmed this way, but based on the conversation that we've had, it sounds like you made a switch at some point in your
Yes.
life to say, I can no longer focus on the outputs. I need to go to the inputs. You know, one of the
Yes.
books, Craig, that I just recently read, excuse me,
Road.
maybe wrote it as well, but read was Think Like a Rocket Scientist. And in
Mm,
Think Like a Rocket Scientist, he talks about inputs versus outputs.
mm,
And the input oriented person is the one that is going to be successful, not the output oriented person. And
Hmm.
he, reconfirming everything that we've been talking about. The question that I have though is when when did you decide to make that, or how, when did you decide to make that shift, and how did you make that shift? How
yeah.
did you go from, that I want to make more, I want to have all this, to something you love and something that you're going to do with passion and move forward?
Yeah. Well, I'm a slow learner. So someone's going to say, well, it's easy to make that shift towards the end, towards the later part of your career. And most of that shift came because I realized what I was doing didn't really matter.
Hmm.
Again, my profession is to coach and teach and consult organizations around high performance. And most of it didn't really work. I mean, they got tweaks and applause and, happy sheets and, oh, you're amazing. And so I'd feel good about myself. I'd go away and nothing would stick.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I was willing to actually look at what I was doing and the contribution I was making, I realized it didn't measure up. And so I started asking myself, why? Like, what's wrong? And it created an uneasiness. So here I am, towards, at a point in my career where seeing the outward vestiges of success, and realizing I'm missing it. And what changed for me was reading.
Mm.
Now, don't get me
Really?
wrong, I did read a couple of books in college, not like cover to cover, but I was an English major and I learned how to get a degree.
Hmm.
In fact, I was scientific and I was driven to get a degree. Now, the education didn't really bother me. I wasn't
Don't
worried
let the
about that.
education get in the way of the degree.
There you go. That's exactly right. And so I realized I am a poster child for that guy who is going through the motions but isn't feeling fulfilled. And I realized that's got to change. So I started reading, and I have to say, one of the best routines that I've started is reading. And so just opening yourself up to, I decided, look, I'm just quoting and parroting what everyone else is saying about performance. What do I know about performance? And I realized very little, but I could quote a lot of other folks, but I didn't really have ideas of my own. And it wasn't until I got to that place of humility where I realized, man, I need to dig in, and it's not too late,
Mm.
because I can't control how many years I've got, whether that's one more day or, 4 more decades. What I can control is the routine for today. And so I started reading and learning, and I realized, oh my goodness, it's not as hard as everyone makes it out to be. And there are things that you can do that are just so simple and fundamental.
What I have in one of the courses that you and I were teaching together, you had said something, and it has stuck with me forever. And that is about reading. Now I'm going to butcher it, and I want you to correct it. But it was something along the lines of, it stuck with me forever. Can you tell?
Uh-huh. It's there.
But it's
It's
there.
there.
It's the thought is there.
Y-
But it was, what is sad, more sad? Is it more sad that people don't know how to read, or is it sadder that you know how to read and don't?
I don't.
There is something along that lines that you had said. Now, correct that for me. Give me that,
Well,
that good richness that you had.
Well,
Tell
no,
me about
that is the richness. I mean, someone who doesn't read is no better than someone who can't. I think
Can't
that's a
read.
Mark Twain quote. And the reality was, I wasn't. I mean, yes, I'd read the Wall Street Journal, I'd read, articles and period, but I wouldn't deeply immerse myself into ideas. So, for instance, I'm currently reading Why We Sleep,
I saw that book. I haven't read it yet. Is it
because
interesting?
I thought, well, there's probably some things I don't know about sleep. And when you read the book, you go, oh my goodness, there's not only things I don't know, there are frightening consequences to your health. And so I thought, man, it's a good thing I picked that book up. Every time I pick one up, I learn more about a subject and a topic. Now, the reason I wasn't reading is that I had convinced myself I don't have time to read.
Mm-hmm.
Again, focused on the outcome. Like, how do you add to your busy day fitting in a book each week?
Right.
When you stop worrying about the outcome, because again, those are for losers, and you start focusing on what's the routine, what's the streak I can start every single day, then all of a sudden, boom, it just starts happening and it just starts becoming self-fulfilling. So, Jamie, back to an early discussion that you and I were having, it's not a matter of like, I've got to learn some technique to read.
Right.
I've got to let this innate part of me that's just curious to know and let this curiosity out. And when I started the routine, boom, that's when it changed for me. And I
See,
realized how little I knew and how much I wanted to know.
Right.
I and what I love about, and I just want to emphasize for everyone that's listening, the significance of what Craig is saying and how streaking can really apply to what it is that he's saying, in the sense that there are some that are out there, and Craig, we had a recent story, for just total inspirational story, from one of our streakers who wrote in and talked about reading.
Yeah.
And for her, it was not that she didn't have time. For her, she felt that she was just
She
not a
wasn't a
good
good
reader,
reader.
that she would mess things up, that it wasn't there. And so to get to this place where she could give herself permission to read just one sentence daily, that was it. Her streak is to read at least one sentence daily. She wrote into us, and what did she say about that? How did it change?
Just what you said, that she was like, I never felt I was a good reader. She said I would look at the pages and the words would kind of jump all over, and it just wasn't something that I did. And so when I started reading one sentence a day, she said, I have never felt like I've improved like I have now. She's like, I'm getting better at reading. And I also think what was happening is that there became an enjoyment there, because one of the things that I've really started to recognize that's happening to me with streaking is it takes away the worry of what everybody else is thinking, what everybody else is doing, what I think I should be doing, how far along the path I feel I should
I
be in
love that.
comparison to where everyone else is. And for her, I felt like that's kind of what happened, is she was able to set all of that aside and say, this is where I am right now. I'm just going to read one sentence a day. And then, as you've said, putting
Mm,
that routine in place gave
yes.
her permission to do it every day. And then she started to see success. And then, like you said, you start to see the fruits of that
Yeah.
effort that you're putting in, and that's empowering. And then I think also these all of these thoughts of accomplishment, achievement, of comparison start to fall away, and that, I guess I want to call it, inner child starts to come out, and you
Mm,
can just be curious, and you're looking at being like, well, I'm doing this because I want to know, not because I want to impress anybody, or this is where I should be, or for
it's
any
on
of
a
the other
test.
reasons. Yeah, some
Yes.
test that I got to pass, or
Yes.
and who is the artist that said, when I was a child, I painted as a child, and then I spent the rest of my life trying to paint like a child again? I can't think of who
Was
it
it
is.
Picasso,
I'm gonna have to go
or
look that up.
Monet, or
It was a famous
I think
artist. It's one
Picasso
of them.
did start
Yeah,
painting
he
again
he
as a
was able to
child.
find his inner child. But the concept being that as a child, like you said, we do these things naturally,
Yes. Yes.
and then something happens, and we bury that, I guess, because we think we should be something different.
Oh,
And we
yes.
spend
Yes.
life trying to get back to having that natural curiosity and lack of inhibition, and just wanting to and contribute. I think a lot of times
Yes.
children do want to contribute. They want to help other people innately.
You know,
Yes.
there's a
We're wired that way.
We
In
are.
fact, I'm convinced that this whole idea of craft and mastery is innate in all of us. We just let go of it over time. The art is summoning it back.
Yeah.
That's really powerful. The art is summoning it back. And I think that's what we were trying to unleash when we came across streaking, because we needed to move it from unconscious to conscious, from
Hmm.
something that we thought
Yes.
was we would just naturally do. And I think this is where people get, I call it the siren song of the habit. Because what happens is people start to talk about habits and the habits of high performers in the context that it's going to come automatically. And that siren song draws you in and just trashes you against the rocks, and you
Yeah.
just look at yourself and say, that never became automatic for me, so I must not be that type of a performer. I must not be able to do those things. Where in actuality, those who are masters of their craft learned, for whatever reason, lot longer ago than I have, that it's the laughably small thing done consistently that keeps you learning and growing and getting that inner child to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so true. In fact, while we're on big artists, let's go with big philosophers. Can I lay some Nietzsche down here?
Yeah, lay some
Yes.
Nietzsche. Just paint us with some Nietzsche, man.
Yeah, I just love his observation, and this has been proven by science. Here's his quote: "Our vanity, our self-love promotes the cult of genius. With everything perfect, we do not ask how it came to be. Instead, we rejoice in the present fact as if though it came out of the ground by magic."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's Angela Duckworth's observation in Grit. We prefer the mystery to the mundanity of excellence.
Right.
Excellence is simply repetitive and routine, streaking, and it's not focused on the outcome. It's just what can you do right now, and just pushing that just micro nano elements. That's how you become excellence, and we get rid of that cult of of genius, as Nietzsche
Yes.
says.
That is this has been so much fun for me. I have a list of notes of all these things and that's what part of the things that I love about when we get to talk to other people about this is I feel personally inspired to want to get better, to be better, to want to be able to, like you said, read more. I was thinking about myself. I talk a lot about my reading streak with my boys, and I've done great with
Are you
that.
familiar with that streak, Craig? Do you know that
Oh
streak that
yes, I
yeah.
love
Yeah.
that. Yes.
But I have
Such a
not
good streak.
set a personal streak for myself to read. And even as you were talking, sometimes I've thought, why have I not done that? And part of it, I think, too, is a little bit that there's so much out there to read, and I can get overwhelmed, or maybe overwhelmed. I don't even know if overwhelmed is the right word. Sometimes I call it the squirrel thing, where I start reading one book and then I'm like, oh, I should read that book. Oh, I should read that book. Oh, I should do. And I get distracted. And I thought,
Yes.
that's the thing about a streak. I'm like, if I can just set a streak to just be reading and allow myself, I loved what you said, to allow yourself to dig deep into a thought. Like,
Yeah.
let yourself be able to
Which
go
speaks
there,
to why
go
we
deep.
talk about laughably simple, actually, is one of the streaks. So one of the streaks I have is to read at least one paragraph in a nonfiction book daily. And one of the things that ancillary benefits that we've recognized, and I've recognized, is that actually gives me permission to slow down and consider that paragraph rather than having the output be, I want to read 200 books a year and I'll just go, through those. Reading one paragraph daily gives me the opportunity to slow down and think about that paragraph. I don't have to hurry to the next thing
Yeah.
to finish that. And that's a whole different mindset shift as well. As I've gone into, because I do have the reading streak where I'm reading at least one paragraph daily, and that was inspired by none other than Mr. Craig Christensen, because I felt so absolutely awful after I came out of one of our consulting engagements and you had said, what's more sad, someone that doesn't know how to read or someone that knows how to read and doesn't?
I thought, I'm pretty sad right now.
Yeah.
I was just channeling my best Mark Twain.
I just
know it's interesting, Jeff, because what you're talking about is when you say, I'm going to read 200 books a year, that's a goal. That's an objective. That's an end. And it's all about the means. It's not about the ends. It's giving yourself the grace to stay in the process and the means. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's why, Edwards Deming, the great total quality expert that, turned around the entire industry of Japan post-World War II. His observation was, if you can't describe what you do as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. And he didn't say, if you can't achieve these things, then you don't know. He actually said, if you can't describe the process, because if you can understand the process, the bite-sized little tiny pieces, then you have the chance to actually work on them right now, in the present, in the moment, as opposed to living in the future. So reading 200 books, what a waste. You're going to lose, Because even if you start that, if you're only on book number 2, well, you're still a loser because you haven't hit 200.
Right.
But when you
So
describe
true.
reading a paragraph, it could be a paragraph, it could be a book in a sitting. It's that process of just taking it in. You unhook from the outcomes and the goals.
We talk about it as a state of being. Who do I want to be? I want to be a person who's continually learning, not be a person that, achieved a goal. I mean, I want to be this person that I'm aiming at all the time. That's so question for you, Craig. How do you and this is a little bit of a side note, how do you choose the books that you're going to read? What is it? I mean, like Jamie said, there's millions of books out there. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, just for your side note, since we published Streaking, Amazon gives us the ranking of where we are in the number of and where books are. And here's the interesting thing for you. On Amazon, 8 million books are available. 8 million. Okay. That's a lot of books. So, how do you choose which books to read?
Well, I started out very narrow in terms of human performance. And so I studied who knows the most about it. So you come up with Erickson, you come up with Colvin, you come up with, Duckworth. I became more aware of, positive psychology. So you come up, Martin Siegelman. And so you come up with those kind of standard bearers so I started reading those things. And then what I started doing is feeling comfortable saying, and what kind of books are they recommending? And what kind of books outside of that? Like this year, I went on I don't know if it's apropos for the pandemic or not, but a World War II, bender. I'm just trying to understand the psychology of like, how do you get into those kind of conflicts? And so Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, I mean, that never would have been on my list. But I was obsessed with how do people make such horrific choices?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's close enough that, we're just a generation or so away from, people who actually lived through that. How does that happen? And how's that part of the psychology? And so while maybe a tangent to someone else, to me was actually very insightful and led to about 10 other books around World War II and psychology and what happens to the masses, very apropos for our elections we just went through.
Mm-hmm.
So you just start making connections. I think your point, Jamie, is very helpful. If you're worried about, well, what's my goal for reading? That's the problem.
Right.
It's not about the goal. So I too, it's like squirrel.
Right.
I get distracted, but it's okay. I don't know how much time. I'll just call it an unlimited amount of time right now, and so I'll read just whatever seems to feel right. And again, I just go with that. Sometimes it's on track to my profession. Sometimes it's way off, and I'm good with all of that because it's not about any kind of outcome I'm looking for. I just want to be learning.
Right. Learning and
I'm
growing.
convinced that learnership is a bigger idea than leadership, and that if we had the humility and the curiosity to stay with, like a child, so when you talk about painting like a child, it's just like learning like a child. If we could be better learners, I think that would be the foundation building block to everything we do.
I love that. So I'm going to say that again. Learnership is better than leadership. Is that how you said it? No.
I
A
think it's
bigger
more
idea.
important.
Bigger.
Yeah, it's a bigger
Learnership
idea
is
than
bigger
leadership.
than
Because if
leadership.
our leaders were actually learners, and again, I'm guilty of this as well, of getting into a profession and heading down the track and saying all the right things and knowing the right thing, but not really being a learner. That's why we struggle, is we stop learning.
Right. And I think as you were saying that, one, I love that. That's one of my B statements, is that I want to be a learner. And part of that came a little bit from what you were saying with school. I felt like I did really well in school, but I didn't come away having learned a lot.
Yeah.
I learned how to perform well in school. That's what I did. I learned how to perform well in school, but I didn't come away feeling like I learned what we were talking about. And the second thing that I thought as you were talking is, one of the things I've learned as a mom is that I always want to be learning about my children, to not assume that I know them. And it's that same basic philosophy of always wanting to be a learner, and not thinking, it allows you to be always growing and not thinking, oh, I've learned that, I know it. Because one thing, the more you learn, the more you start to realize how much there is to learn.
Yes.
And it's humbling, but it keeps you in this place where you are moving forward. And I think that is fantastic in the things that we can learn in this world, but also what you were saying, I feel like in our relationships with people, as we approach life with this idea of, I want to always be learning about the environment around me, learning about the people that have come before me, and learning about the people that are right now in my life and giving them the chance to grow and change as
Yes.
they're becoming, and then having that same reciprocity back to me.
Mhm.
I feel like that's a part of what you were talking about, where
So
deep
good.
down inside, what we yearn for is to contribute.
Yes.
That's part of that, is that
Yes.
continually learning, contributing is that back and forth, learning from others and then giving back what we've learned.
And the beautiful thing about being present in terms of what you study, in other words, making it relevant to whatever you're experiencing. So we just go through, what we've gone through this past year, not just the pandemic, but just the social, upheaval. Black Lives Matter.
Right.
I haven't had that experience. I don't know what that is.
Right.
And so it's easy to stand back and say, well, and make judgments about that. Instead, I decided I need to learn. I need to find out. So reading autobiographies of Martin Luther King, of Malcolm X, reading about white fragility, reading about all these things where that's not my experience. For the first time, I was able to say, oh, that's what my kids are telling me about inclusion. That's what they mean about. And so rather than just judging because I don't understand, it actually opens up in me just a well of empathy to see it and appreciate what other people are experiencing. And rather than judging a movement, I can actually better understand. Now, again, I'm still a long ways away from, I haven't experienced it, but I sure come a lot closer to understanding the need for more inclusion and more acceptance and more
Yeah.
love.
So opening yourself up to that is overcoming a lot of ego. That's one of the things that I look at too, is that ego, looking at myself and overcoming ego. One of the things that I have recently, well, not recently, I've actually been praying for it for quite some time, is for charity.
Yeah.
Because charity is that pure love of Christ that opens us up to be able to see and hear and feel things that we haven't maybe seen or felt or heard before, and reject the natural response to, or what I call my allergic response to things that, that's not me.
Unfamiliar, or
Yeah, it's not as familiar. I'm gonna reject that right out of the chute, which doesn't get there. Well, this has been another dynamic conversation. We only have a couple of minutes left. Craig, we have talked about the Kraft Curve in 2 settings and haven't mentioned one thing about it.
Well,
Just give us a primer on it, and then let's
yes.
let's talk about it again, because there's 2 things I think in future podcasts that we want to talk to you about. The whole ills of social media and how you manage that, because there is a place for social media, but there's also the ills of social media. And I know that, it's, you don't become completely sterile to everything around you. You figure out a way to incorporate it, but that's for a future podcast.
Yes.
And the Kraft Curve we can go into further, but let's just give us a little bit of a primer on the Kraft Curve.
So the what brought the Kraft Curve about is trying to think through, how do people progress in terms of a skill or a concept, or they want to make a change. So I was just doodling, and I just came up with a simple axis. The y axis goes up and down. Consider that skill from low skill at the very base of that line to high skill at the very top. And then on the x-axis, if you think about impact, like the kind of impact, the kind of contribution you're making, whether it's to your team, your family, your community, whatever it might be. I then started to just wonder, well, so what's the trajectory? Because obviously, if you start out as a beginner, not much skill there,
Right.
very little contribution or impact, and that's okay. In fact, I think one of the challenges we have is being okay with being a beginner. If we could be more comfortable with a beginner's mind, and realizing that no, that's actually how everyone starts. We don't berate a toddler for wobbling. Like,
Right.
straight. No, stop that. It's like, oh, aren't they cute? And we like, ooh, ah, and it's so cute. But when you're an adult, when you wobble, it's like, shame on you. We get into the shame academy. So just thinking about, so how does that happen now, especially in a work or professional context? The objective becomes get great or be great, and skip all the steps in between. It's like, no, actually, you're going to be lousy. Your ability, Jeff and Jamie, your ability to stay on that curve while you're trying to figure out how to express streaking. It's not, I mean, you had it all up here in your head, but how do you convey it? Oh my goodness, that's a whole different task. It's easier to teach it, much harder to write about it, someone that you don't know, and have it make sense. So you start that journey of skill and impact. You're a beginner. You might get to a point where you become a novice, and there you have some conscious incompetence. Again, you're aware that you don't know, but at least you're aware. Better than the people who are clueless, all the way around. Right. You move up to practitioner, where you start getting some conscious competence, and of course you want to move to someone who could coach to it, an expert. And at the very highest end of that is the master. It was helpful for me to think about the journey that people go on, and realizing, first of all, I need to be patient with where they are. And also, I need to be patient where I am in terms of helping them along that journey. So it was helpful for me to realize that we go from a level of just learning. When we get better, we start actually doing. And when we get higher in that craft curve is when we become. And so that's when, you don't have to think about something. You can actually, it's instinct, and you focus on nuance. But if you're lower down that curve, you're just trying to keep it together and keep the wheels on and keep going. And of course, the beauty of streaking is that you can climb that curve. It is inherent and innate to all of us to develop the craft. What we need to do is we need to stop wondering, where do I find my passion? Where do I find my calling? Knock it off. Quit worrying about that stuff. All you need to do is focus today on staying in that journey. Your calling, your passion isn't found like a lost pair of socks. Your passion is forged daily in routine, in little bitty things that you do every single day. That's what I've learned.
Wow. That's all I have to say is
Me
wow.
too. I'm like, and we'll just do a little mic drop there.
Mic drop right there. Craig, it has been an absolute pleasure for us. Wow. We are excited to, hopefully you will accept an invitation to talk with us again, because what you have just thrown down there and how the craft curve works and how streaking works within it, Jamie.
I want to go back and listen to our own podcast so I can write down more of what he said.
I know.
I mean, Craig, this has been
Craig, you're just an amazing individual, and we love you, and you're just such a great mentor and friend, and have been for, and hope to we get to continue this for a long time.
And I want to say, keep doing what you're doing, because this is inspiring. This has been, I love the visual of a craft curve of where I am and looking at myself and just not trying to expect myself to be someplace else, but recognize where I am and stay on the curve.
We often call it the streaking journey. Yeah. I mean, we invite people to come on the streaking journey with us,
And it's a step forward, 2 back, 3 to the side, 8 forward, 9 back. It looks like in, one of those cardiogram things.
Yes.
Well, thank you. You're both just so generous with your time and energy. Streaking is such a big idea. And what excites me about it is that it gives people those seeds of routine that they need, that allow them to become all they can be. And of course, the reason we do everything we do is to contribute. And so I so appreciate the contribution the two of you are making.
Well, thank you. Well, if you'd like to reach out to us, please do so. Let us know questions that you have for Jamie or I or Craig. Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at streakingmastery.com.
Jamie, Jamie, I@streakingmastery.com.
Or Mr. Craig Christensen.
I want to be Craig at streakingmastery.com.
Okay, you got it. You are going to
Craig,
have an honorary account, my friend. Absolutely.
Craig, CRAIG at craftworks.com. That's with a K and an X.
There we go. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful, fantastic day. It's been an absolute delight. And until we talk again, keep streaking.
But I can show you a simpler way. It's the small and simple things that make the life we live worth living. Among the rush, do one push up, become a better you. It's the small and simple things that make you grow into what you're hoping. You're in a hurry, don't even worry. It's too simple not to do. It's the little things that make a better you. A better you.